Somewhere Better by I_am_Ellie on AO3. Episode 52. Chapter 9. Pain. Izuku's birthday was 5 days before the last day of school, and he absolutely hated it. Izuku's birthday was on a Monday that year. That meant that his birthday fell on the last week of school, everyone being left out for the summer the following Friday. Izuku didn't like the last day of school. Everyone was loud and running around, and the teacher didn't say anything to them about their inside voices, like she usually did when everyone got too excited. Now she just sat back at her desk and clicked away on her computer. Izuku suspected this was because of the quickly approaching summer holiday. Ochako and Hitoshi were like Izuku. They didn't like the noise either. All the energy in the room and the yelling made Hitoshi nervous, and Ochako enjoyed peace and quiet. Denki had been nervous too, at first, but then had quickly washed away when Mei had pulled him into the commotion. Denki and Mei ran about the room and shrieked right along with everyone else, while Izuku, Ochako, and Hitoshi sat at their table. Izuku contemplated how much trouble he would be in with his uncles if he threw an eraser at that one kid who was standing on a table and reenacting the opening scene from The Lion King. Quite a bit, Izuku figured, so he decided he wouldn't risk it. He hadn't informed any of his friends about his birthday. Not yet. Hitoshi's birthday had been on the 1st of July. Denki's birthday had been 2 days before that, and Mei's half a month before Denki's. Following her realization that she was the oldest, she had yet to stop for lording it over everyone else. Denki had always made jokes about her being an elderly woman in return, and they were always so funny that even Hitoshi smiled at them sometimes. Ochako was the youngest because her birthday wasn't until December, and Mei and Denki liked to call her the baby. Ochako would yell at them and frown and huff because she didn't like being called a baby. But Izuku sometimes caught her trying not to laugh when Denki and Mei made jokes like that, so she must have not minded too much. He asked his Unki Sashi and Unki Sho if he could stay at home on his birthday, if he could cuddle with the cats and watch movies, eat too much ice cream, and maybe go to the park later that day. They hadn't seemed to like the idea much. "You have to go to school, Cabbage," Uncle Sho had said. "You can do all that fun stuff when you come home later, Zoo," Unki Sashi had told him on the drive to school. So, here he was, stuck in the classroom on his birthday, watching the clock as it ticked away, getting closer and closer to the time where he could go home and do all that fun stuff, just like his uncles had promised. He was almost there. He just had to wait a little longer. A little longer. Mei and Denki had come back to the table, crashed into it, more like, knocking the chairs to the side, just barely catching them before they toppled over. Hitoshi had been on the brink of falling asleep, and he had woken up with a jerk at Denki's and Mei's sudden entrance. Denki laughed breathlessly, and strands of his hair were sticking to his forehead with sweat. The same thing could be said for Mei. Izuku wasn't sure how or even why, since their classroom was a small one and there wasn't enough room for them to have run around and gotten that sweaty, but they have accomplished it. They amazed him. "Sorry, too," Denki seffed, huffing a breath and wiping his forehead with the sleeve of his uniform. Izuku knew Denki liked exercise and movement. He would probably be good in a sport team later on if he tried. He was always wound up, tight as a bowstring, stiff and distracting and fidgety. He never seemed to be able to sit still in one place for long, and had made it up for moving and fidgeting and tapping and gesturing as much as possible. Denki got written up by the teacher a lot because of that. Denki took another breath, wiping his forehead again, and repeated the apology. Hitoshi huffed and buried his face back into his arms. "I can't wait for summer," Mei gushed, still bouncing in place. Where exercise and movement helped wind down Denki, Mei only seemed to get more hyped up. She acted like Unki Sashi when he had tried one of Auntie Nemuri's energy drinks. He hadn't been able to go back to sleep all night, and Unki Sho had looked scared for him for about a week afterwards. I get so much more time to work on my inventions. Oh, and the park. I can't wait until I get to go to the park every day again. It'll be so much fun. My mommy and daddy are going on lots of business trips over the summer, and they said I could go to one of them. Ochako exclaimed, eyes gleaming with excitement. A whole week. We're going across the country. It'll be so much fun. Denki leaned forward, adding his own piece to the conversation. I'm going back to America for a couple weeks, a month after school ends. Denki said, grinning widely. I get to see my grandma again. Oh, and for my birthday, she sent me these Nanika books in the mail, and I'm on my first one, and it's really good. And I'm gonna finish reading them over the summer. And oh, and Haru is going to this too. This academic contest thingy in Maine when we go visit because Haru is really smart and we're all gonna get to watch. Mom and Dad aren't gonna be there for the first part of the 2 weeks, but they're gonna be flying over the part and it's gonna be a contest about spelling and the peer. He stopped for a moment, huffing in frustration. Periodic table. And he's gonna do great, because Mom and Dad call Haru a genius and a prodigy. And that means he's really smart, so he's gonna do awesome and get the first prize and Denki takes a deep breath, gasping breath. I'm so excited to go back home. He froze for a moment, smile fading. He looked a bit nervous now. Kinda? No, it'll be great. He nodded assuredly, and Izuku didn't think that Denki was talking to them anymore. Denki shook his head, shaggy blonde hair flying, before looking up again. That's all I'm really doing, he said with an easy smile. What are you doing, Zuku, Toshi? Hitoshi dragged himself up, taking his red notebook out, and Izuku watched while Hitoshi wrote. Not much. Izuku started. My Uncle Sho says he'll teach me more about gymnastics and stuff like that, and Uncle Sashi said he'll take me to his radio show so I can look at all the stuff and listen to the music, and I really want to spend more time with Auntie Nem over the summer. I don't get to see her as much anymore because when she comes over to babysit, I'm always asleep. Hitoshi pushed his notebook to the center of the table. Watch Dad do doctor stuff. Lets me watch surgeries sometimes. At home a lot. Maybe play with Bonte. Izuku read it out loud for the benefit of everyone at the table, and Denki gasped dramatically. You got to watch your dad do surgery on people's brains? He asked, bouncing up and down in excitement. That's so cool! Hitoshi shrugged. There was a scoff from the table of the mean boys. Sure, like his dad is a brain surgeon. One of the boys exclaimed, grinning as if the entire idea of it amused him. He was one of the meaner boys. He'd always made Izuku mad. He didn't like bullies. Unki Sashi said he got that from his Unki Sho. His hatred of bullies. Hey, Toe! The boy called Hitoshi. Hitoshi shrunk down in his chair, chin falling down against his chest, and Denki winced because he called Hitoshi Toe. Izuku saw Denki bite his lip, hand wriggling on the table at the top of the desk. He looked guilty. If your dad's a brain surgeon, the boy said, voice just quiet enough for the teacher wouldn't hear him. The boy didn't look or talk like the bullies on the TV. The bullies on the TV were big, broad, with buzz cuts and bad grades. The boy was tall, taller than Hitoshi, and Hitoshi was one of the tallest kids in class. Skinny, and he had floppy teal hair that fell in his eyes. He didn't look like a bully. He didn't look like the bullies on television. He didn't beat them up or shove them in lockers, though there weren't any lockers on campus, given it was a primary school. But he was cruel and rude and mean, and Unki Sho said that counted as bullying. Unki Sho had explained to him what a bully was near the beginning of the school year. Anyone who physically harmed you without provocation. Izuku couldn't remember what provocation meant, but he knew the gist of it. Someone who was repeatedly cruel to you for no reason even after you asked them to stop. Anyone who hurt you. physically or emotionally, repeatedly. If anyone is bullying you, Ankisho said, looking a bit angry, for a moment, even though he hadn't been bullied back then. Anyone. Tell me, or a teacher, or your headmaster. That's a rule. Follow the rules. Tell us if it's happening. Ankisho hadn't explained to him how difficult following the rules would be. Then how come he hasn't fixed yours? Hitoshi's shoulders were bunched up near his ears, and he looked small, even though he was taller than most of the kids in class. Even though Izuku knew he was strong, that he could handle himself, he looked so small. Izuku didn't like that. He didn't like that at all. When he, Denki, and Hitoshi had been called over at the headmaster's office, Mr. Shinsou had said something about Hitoshi having selective mutism and social anxiety. Izuku didn't know what those words meant. He had been meaning to ask Miss Yuna, because she was a doctor, and the word diagnose usually meant some sort of doctor was involved, but he hadn't been back to her office in over 2 months. He was scared of her. He was so scared of her now, and he knew he shouldn't be, but he was. But he wanted to go back. He did, and Ankisho and Hizashi had told him to take his time, to go back when he was ready. So he was. He was taking his time. But he knew that Hitoshi was always scared, and that Hitoshi was always sad. And he knew that he wouldn't fight back, couldn't fight back, was too scared to fight back. Maybe that's why Izuku did what he did. Because Izuku wanted to be a hero. He wanted to be a hero more than anything in the whole world. And heroes always help people who couldn't help themselves. Maybe that's why, when they were called to recess hours later, he felt ill, not saying anything to the bully then, not saying anything at all, letting Hitoshi sink into his chair like that, like it would turn himself invisible, like the boy would just forget he was there, forget he existed. He ran outside ahead of everyone else. Maybe that's why, even when his friends called his name, he didn't come to find them. Maybe that's why he walked towards the tiered-hair boy instead. His hands were shaking, fear and anger and righteousness, and something in his arms and legs and chest that buzzed. He felt as scared as Hitoshi had looked, but he clenched his fist and planted his feet and stood his ground. And when he found the boy, when he felt so small compared to him, he tried to imagine that he was as tall as Hizashi and as brave as Ankisho, as heroic as All Might. He looked up at him, and when he spoke, even though he felt shaky and so off-killer, his voice was steady. "Leave my friends alone!" he shouted. They were at the edge of the playground. His friends were somewhere in the middle, near the monkey bars, looking for him. He could see Denki and Mei on the top of the bars, looking around, and Hitoshi leaning against the ladder of the monkey bars, not moving. He thought he might be staring at him. "They didn't do anything to you. They never did nothing to you. Leave them alone." The tear-haired boy had been playing kickball with the other mean boys. The ball was abandoned now, laying in the green grass. None of the boys were even looking at the ball now. They were all looking at Izuku. Izuku felt sweat prickling on the back of his neck. The boy laughed. "We were just joking around, Midoriya," he barked. "Stop taking everything so seriously." He punctuated the sentence with such hard shove to Izuku's shoulder. "No!" Izuku yelled. There was a reason he was doing this now, and not inside. The teachers were near the front of the playground, talking and playing cards. No one was looking back here, and that wasn't good, because Izuku knew things could go bad. But at least he knew he wouldn't get in trouble. Izuku took a deep breath, steeled his nerves, and pushed back. Not hard, but the teared-hair boy stumbled back a foot, just like Izuku had when he had pushed him. "You don't get to joke like that!" Izuku exclaimed. His voice was rising in pitch, close to a shriek. "Don't touch me, you!" Izuku didn't hear the rest. Izuku knew what everyone in his class's quirks were. He'd learned them near the beginning of the school. He had committed them to memory. The tear-haired boy could make sharp, jagged crystals line up and down his fingers when he activated his quirk. When he clenched his hand into a fist and punched Izuku in the face, it felt like a rock had been what made his nose bleed. Not a 6-year-old boy. But it hadn't been a rock. It had been a fist. Is me cutting every chapter in 2 just a ploy so that I don't, finish this series anytime soon because I don't want to finish it and have it be unconcluded? Maybe. It'll give us the illusion that there's more. It will give us the illusion that there's more. I decided to cut it there. Technically speaking, I could have gone in a little bit more, but then next chapter wouldn't have been as long. I also am cutting it short each time because these videos ended up being like 30, 40 minutes long. That's pushing it for me. Pushing it for me. Honestly, pushing it. Especially with how much recording I need to do and stuff like that. Maybe down the line I'll do more longer videos, but for now, 15, 20-minute intervals. That's what we're doing. But Izuku literally got himself punched. I will go into the psychology behind that in a bit. But I really hate that comment. Fix your mind. Hitoshi doesn't have anything wrong with him, right? Yes, he has social anxiety, but that does not mean that he is mentally unwell. It just means that he has more anxiety than other people, simple as that. Yes, it is a mental disorder, but just because it is a mental disorder does not mean it is something bad that needs fixing. Which I'm pretty sure social anxiety doesn't really have a cure to begin with, but yes, technically speaking, he can go to therapy to then not learn how to speak, but learn how to manage his anxiety so that he can speak. But that does not mean that he needs to do that. And some people just don't want to do that, right? Some people just don't want to do that. He's a 5-year-old. Let him live his fucking job. Not his job. Hold up. Moving on. Denki reminded me of my brother in this chapter. The whole excited energy kind of thing. That reminded me a lot of my brother. I love that Uraraka's gonna be able to be with her parents a little more. I love that. Oh my god. Now, I mentioned a while before that the teacher really does not like Izuku, Denki, Hitoshi, Mei, probably because she's a gremlin. And I didn't understand why Uraraka, and I was like, is it because she's poor? Are they just classist? Well, what is it? And then somebody in the comments, I saw a lot of people saying this in the comments, but somebody specifically said, maybe it's because Ochako gets along with all the quote-unquote weird kids and bad kids that she must have something wrong with her too. Which is like, oh, so that's why. Because Ochako gets along with Izuku, the quirkless one, Hitoshi, the one who can't quote-unquote speak. He can speak, he just can't speak there. Denki, the one who's hyperactive, which, let's be honest, man says ADHD. And Mei, the gremlin. I love Mei. She's my spirit animal sometimes, But because they hang around with, she specifically hangs around with them, the teacher just immediately associates Ochako with them and must think like, oh, something's wrong with that kid too. Not saying that there's something wrong with Hitoshi, Izuku, Denki, or Mei. There's nothing wrong with them. Just that's how the teacher views it, and that is disgusting and horrible. I think it's horrible. I think it's disgusting. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, it's sad. It's upsetting to know that that's what's happening. And teachers should not do that. Teachers really should not do that. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. If you want to see more of my content, subscribe. I don't know my outro anymore. Have a good day, my raindrops.